Beautiful. You guys can open up your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 1. I sent out the lesson via email to the members of the church. If you're visiting with us and you would like to receive that, just nudge the person to your left or to your right, just so it's a little bit easier to follow along. But we're not going to bounce around the scriptures too much this morning. But again, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And like Eric said, a reminder for everyone else to say the same thing to your mother if you have not already. And we all know that mothers definitely hold a special place in our hearts that nothing else can fill. You know, we have all learned many things in our lives. But the greatest teacher at times is not experience and not even our hopeful fathers. It is our mothers that teach. And it's 1 Samuel chapter 1. You know, we have learned many great things from our caring mothers. In the beginning, firstly, it comes natural. Then a little bit reluctantly in our teens. Then hopefully we learned all those lessons by our adulthood. And maybe even with some of us wishfully as our mothers are no longer with us. But because of this, mothers hold definitely a special place in our heart. You know, the first Mother's Day was actually celebrated and took part in a church in America before the tariffs and all those things. But, you know, it actually began in a church. You know, mother's love is one of the highest forms of love that we have example here on earth. You know, there's a couple different sayings with it. A mother's love is early heaven. You know, it's my joy to see Tegan love Eli and Kyresa and Kai. Whenever I see them, I kind of just go, like I want to tackle Eli on the couch and everything. But I see Tegan just sitting there in peace, just like staring at Kai when she's smiling or has a little grumps or all those little things. You know, it's a joy to see that. You know, there's sayings like, he has a face only a mother can love. It's a lot of love sometimes for some people. But love is the curse of a mother, right? Mothers really exemplify love. But it's not always easy being a mom, so I'm told. Right, there's this saying where a mother and a child were in a grocery store, and the child was throwing tantrums and wanted candy and ice cream and all these certain things. And throughout the period, the mom's just whispering to herself or just saying, "It's going to be okay, Sarah. Just calm down, Sarah. Just a little bit longer, Sarah." And the cashier noticed this, and she went up to the mom and just like, "Wow. You're such a great example of patience. How are you so patient with little Sarah?" And she goes, "My name is Sarah." I'm telling myself to calm down at times. You know, it's not always easy to be a mother, but it is important. It is said when God wants to do a good work, he gets hold of a man. When he wants to do a great work, he gets hold of a woman. Many of the Bible stories start off with a woman, a mother, and a child. Exodus begins with a woman having faith that her child Moses will be protected as she sends him along the river. The line of David begins with a woman named Ruth. The preservation of Israel from Persia was founded on the bravery of Esther. She had faith and she put her life on the line. The gospel, where does it start? It starts with the mother of Jesus, Mary. And so there's so many lessons that we get to learn from our mothers, and we're going to learn a few of those here today. My title of my lesson this morning is Great Mothers. Point number 1, great mothers have great problems. Great mothers have great problems. It's good to start off and say this because sometimes we can view motherhood as perfection and these high expectations for ourselves or for them. We can view them as like a biblical character. Right? They're perfect. They always have incredible insight. They're so humble. They glow in the dark. They can do all these amazing things that we feel like we cannot. But they had problems, and so do mothers. You know, some of those problems are sitting here today. Right? Where are mothers' problems? You know, and it's challenging. It can be difficult. You know, I think Tegan is super, super strong. With her pregnancies, both with Eli and Kyresa, it blew me out. Like, there's like this breathing technique that you're supposed to do, right? When they teach you this with the midwives, they'll say, okay, 4 seconds in and 8 seconds out. And so whenever she's going through labor, I'm kind of trying to help her breathe. Like, you know, trying to do that. And after a while, even I'm like, I'm tired of breathing this way. You know, like, Tegan, I need to take a break. But it's like, but, you know, she's going through all of this. And, you know, it was crazy how much she did. And to be honest, she has a lot of faith in me. Next Saturday, I think her and Maddie are going to Les Mis, the musical. But she's already kind of warned me. She's like, Sean, that means you're taking care of both the kids. And I'm like, dang, that's a lot of faith. That's a lot of trust. But she does that like nearly every day of the week. But it blows my mind. Pray for me. And anybody free Saturday, you're invited over. Bring food. But mothers have challenges. And so we're going to start here to see the very first verses we're going to find out. There's going to be already presenting some problems. Here, we're going to read about a man named Elkanah and his 2 wives. Verse 2, starting in chapter 1, it says, he, being Elkanah, had 2 wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. For Mother's Day, we're going to actually be starting and talking about a woman who had trouble becoming a mother. It says very few words about Hannah. Hannah had none. There's a lot of emotions in this verse already, right? You might even understand, like, the brother's household had no food. Oh, the devastation, right? He had no girlfriend. Oh, right? But we can already understand. It's pretty crazy. Eli, we were in the car the other day, and we're just like, hey, do you love mom? Do you love dad? And he goes, I love Alex. And if you don't know who Alex is, it's this little girl in his daycare that we have to keep an eye on now. Make sure, her taxes are good and everything. But, there's challenges there. But it already talks about Hannah was lacking what was making her potentially feel fulfilled. She had none. Back in those days, being able to have children was vital to a woman's worth. The more children you had, the better it was seen in those days. They were seen as blessings from God. Not so much anymore. No, I'm joking. Children are still blessings. They're blessings still today. Maybe a little bit of testing as well. But they saw it like to have a child was God's blessing. In Psalms 127, verse 3 to 4, it says, children are a heritage from the Lord. Offspring, a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. So like a warrior with a bow but no arrow was Hannah with no child. Feeling like you're without power, that you don't have anything that you're adding to the family. Childlessness at that time was such a stigma that it was seen as an infliction by God. And this is actually how she saw her situation. If you read, dropping down to verse 11, it says she's made a vow saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. She saw this as the reason for her misery. In other verses it says, or in other versions it says, your servant's affliction. Jacob's wife, Leah, when she finally became pregnant, she said that you looked at my affliction. Rachel, she says, give me children or I will die. Throughout the Bible, they've struggled at times, women have struggled at times to become a mother. One rabbi said that there are 3 people that are going to be excommunicated by God. A Jew who has no wife, and a Jew who has a wife but no child. If there was no child within 10 years of marriage, there was ground for divorce back then. Or a husband could be allowed to marry a second wife. So that was her first problem. She had none. But also, it talked about the other wife, right? It says her second problem is that she had a rival. It didn't just state that she was childless, but it first mentioned that this woman, Peninnah, Penny the pest, right? She had children. Verse 4, it says, whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, she would give portions of the meat to his wife, Peninnah, and all her sons and daughters. She had many sons and daughters. The feast at this time would be like a time of rejoicing, but not for Hannah, right? It would be a time of sorrow and a reminder of what she's lacking. Verse 6 through 8, it says, because the Lord has closed Hannah's wound, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on for year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her until she wept and could not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? But it sees here that Peninnah, she wasn't getting away. She wasn't letting her pass on this. She didn't let Hannah forget about it. And there was a purpose to her poking and her prodding. It was to irritate her. It wasn't just like on accident or anything. Look at all the meat that I got. It was like just trying to get a raise from her. You know, some moms now think the job has been transferred to their kids. Right? I love Eli to death. But at times he can be my biggest enemy. We have this child book that has all like, you know, children's stories in it and everything. And every single time we read it, he always like points out like a princess and goes, "Mommy, mommy." But whenever we get to Humpty Dumpty, he goes, "Daddy." I'm like, this little punk kid, you know. But our kids are there sometimes as tests. But all in all, we find that Hannah, the soon-to-be mother, had a lot of issues, had a lot of challenges. Infertility is defined as not being able to become pregnant or conceive after a year of trying, or an inability to carry pregnancy to live birth. And approximately 1 in 6 couples experience this, which is quite a high rate. The cause is equally between men and women, but it's actually a huge issue at times that can hurt relationships. And I just want to say a few things about this. One is, I don't know why it's so connected, but childbearing is 100% under the sovereignty of God. It says that he closed her wombs, or he would open up the wombs of another. Your value to God is not based off of your ability to produce, though. And 2, you are not alone. Most women that experience childlessness are the matriarchs of our faith. Throughout the Bible, you find that they had trouble and they would go to God, that being Sarah of Abraham and many more. It almost proves that if you are without child, you're not cursed, you're just kept for a deeper purpose. Kept for a bigger purpose, or just for another timing. Because there are more kids that need parents than parents that are in need of kids at times. So with these issues, we find out that Elkanah could not fulfill Hannah. Right? Could you imagine what he's saying? Don't I mean more to you? Look at this. Right? Like, Elkanah, bro. But that was his argument. Don't I mean more to the kids, to everything? Look how good I am. But he couldn't fulfill this. You know, we have 2 people here. Someone with an empty heart and someone trying to fulfill that heart. Elkanah kept trying to give her more meat and everything. Here's more food. And you do that when you want to honor people. You can kind of remember this if Joseph, he always received 5 times more than his other brothers in the Bible, because that's the way you honored people in the Bible. And so he honored her, but he could not fix her. And guess what? This shocks men. It does. 1, food fixes our problems. And 2, food sometimes fixes women's problems. But it wasn't working this time. You can almost experience, like, think what Hannah... Okay, stop giving me more meat, mate. Like, just stop. It's not making a difference. Have you ever tried to fix something and you just made it worse? And now you're frustrated because your love isn't being accepted, and now you're mad that they're mad, and it just gets this tanglement of annoyance. That's possibly what they were going through. But it teaches us that you cannot be the solution for others, and others cannot be your solution. Your faith cannot be based on others or even your leaders. When others go through a problem, do you try and be the solution, or do you point them to God? Sometimes it's not about what you try and put in. It's broken. It's not within your qualifications to fix it. Have you ever seen somebody without the qualifications try to fix your car, your crazy uncle try and help out and stuff, and they just made things worse? You know, I see that all the time. I put the chairs out only for minutes later, people to adjust the chairs a little. They were perfectly fine, bro. You know? But we can do that. You know? But we can do that. We can go in there where it's not in our qualifications to fix it. And we're trying to take God's job. I know at a difficult time, when Tegan was experiencing family challenges, it was difficult for me to separate her unhappiness for the situation and our connection as a marriage, if that makes sense. It was difficult to find out what's the difference. And I had to be mature and be there for her without kind of questioning myself as a husband. And it's challenging. But what we're just trying to do, it's kind of like if you envision a broken cup, a cracked cup. And you go, okay, they're broken. Well, let me try and fix it. And so you try and pour love into it. And it seeps out and you go, okay, love doesn't work. And like, okay, let me give them a lot of scriptures. And you pour scriptures into their heart. And well, that's not working. And you just go, well, nothing works. But it's not about what you're pouring in, is that you have to fix what's broken. And that's not your job. You have to give that back to God. The best thing that we can do is be a roadmap to God. To those all trying to fix a broken heart, God wants his job back. It's not about what you are doing or what you're trying to do. You have to point them back to God. We can try doing all these things in our life, but it just doesn't work because God is the one to fix it. And how do we fix it? Or how do we get God to fix it? We stay submerged in God. We put all of our life in God. If you think about that broken cup, instead of trying to get like a bowl full of water and put it in that cup, you put that water into the cup itself and submerge it. Then there's no leaks because you are surrounded by God's love. My first encouragement or first lesson that we learn from mothers is that they have great problems, but they even have a bigger God. Regardless of what your problem is today, take it to God. We all have problems and it's not unusual to have them. But stay strong in the word and close in prayer. There is no excuse in your pursuit to God to excuse your pursuit for God, even your problems. Our problems are actually to get us closer to God, not to become a victim. Do your problems turn you away from God? Problems of sin, problems of university, or different priorities in your life. Problems of money, persecution, character issues, challenges of relationships. Do they take you away from God, or do they get you closer to God? Point number 2, great mothers keep great priorities. Verse 9 through 15. Once they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli the priest was sitting in his chair by the doorstep of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled, for I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. It's pretty funny here. Like any good priest, he thinks that she's drunk. Could you imagine me coming up to you and praying, like, Carmel, like, just lay off the liquor a little bit. like, okay, Sean, what's going on? But he accuses her. And yet she goes, hey, I'm not drunk. Good, comeback. I'm just praying. Hopefully nobody in the church ever has to say those words. But we see that this is a woman in prayer totally dependent on her God. As a saying, when there are tears in the eyes, there is testing in the heart. See, we don't hear her, though, complaining to her husband, and nor does she ask God to smite her rival. These are not the things that she's praying. She knew this problem was not about them, but could not be solved by them. She took it to God. She wasn't going like saying all the things and talking to Elkanah or going back to Penny the Pest or anything like that. She just went to God. She says the Lord of hosts. What does that mean? There's many titles to God. This means like the master and commanders of the army in heaven. That's kind of the title she's using here. And it says here, if you take notice, it says she continued to pray. Meaning this wasn't some religious ritual or just filling the air with words and a daily prayer that she says. She was fighting in prayer. Verse 17 and 18 gives us a little bit more insight. It says, Eli answered, go in peace. May the God of Israel grant what you have asked him. She said, may your servant find favor in your eyes. Then she went away and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. So us men were a little bit right. Food does help with that. But we also notice when she left this prayer, how does she feel? She was no longer in anguish, but she left affirmed. That her peace was now passing that understanding as we understand in the scriptures. All that is to say is there's a woman here with a real relationship with God. That her prayer actually made a difference. There's a depth and an affectionate relationship she had. There's a saying, if you want to change the world, get a mother to pray. Abraham Lincoln once said that no one is poor who has a godly mother. Hannah had a great problem, but she had a greater prayer life. It is not recorded of, again, her going to her husband for comfort to fix her or to blame him. She went to God. This great mother had great priorities. She did have a great relationship with her husband. She loved her husband and he loved her. She was honored by him. But all this was to say she knew to bring the issues to God. There's a saying, the greatest gift that you can give to your child is to publicly love God and your partner. And she was doing that. She was setting an amazing example to be a mother. There's another saying, have your children say stop kissing rather than stop fighting. Actually, I love what Eli's nightly routine is. So we'll give him a bath, change his nappy and everything. But he'll go around, he'll first kiss Tegan, kiss mom, and then kiss baby Kai. But before he goes up to the stairs, he says, Dad, kiss. So I'm like, great wingman, and so I get to kiss mom as well and kiss baby Kai. But it's awesome. You want your kids to see that you love each other. Because if they don't see the love within the family home, they will find it in all the wrong places. The single most contributing factor to children having a difficult future or not is if they live in a home with both parents or not. That's the number one contributing factor. For me, I love what God has blessed us with, because I remember one time I was just kind of taking stock and I went through every single friend I've ever had in high school. Every single one of them, now their parents are divorced or they were separated from the beginning. Every single one. And that just blows my mind that that's really a statistic out there in the world that even I was facing. And now to be able to have the opportunity that Eli and Kyresa get to be raised in a household with a mom and a dad, I'm super, super blessed. Because the most difficult job in the world is single motherhood. And I'm going to experience that a little bit Saturday night. So if you want to come on over, help your brother out. But, it's extremely challenging. And I think it's given me deeper appreciation for my mom, and the challenges that she had to go through in raising up. Hannah knew how to love and in which order. She prioritized God and her relationship with her husband. And we see her value her family as well. Priorities are important. Even in Mother's Day, it should teach us this and remind us this. The woman who created Mother's Day actually worked really hard to get rid of it. Why? Because what found out is all the department stores started using it as just a cash grab event. And she saw that it was taken no longer to value mothers, but now just for people to buy flowers and do these different things. And so she actually went to court trying to protect the day from department stores. Because she was like, I just want it to be focused on mothers. And sometimes we can miss that as well. If you do not know how to deal with your emotions in prayer before God, it will lead you to fall away. If you don't learn how to prioritize your problems and bring them to God, and you try and allow other people to be God in your life, it's never going to work. Some of us have way too many feelings for way too long. Hannah had these feelings. She walked away affirmed from one prayer. It's like, okay, that's good. I pray to God, God's going to keep it. Sometimes we can pray and feel things all week, but it's like, what are you doing in your prayer life then? Do your prayers actually work? We have so many feelings about people in the church or things that are happening and not getting open. It's like, are you dealing with them with God? Either you're not praying or your prayers don't change you. And that's something to fix. Do you walk out of your prayer life different? There's a saying, pray until something happens. Pray until you repent. Pray until you start to see Jesus in your character more than yourself. Pray until you get the answer that you want. Or not that you want, but the answer that God is trying to show you in your life. It's awesome that when this actually happened with Hannah, she was amazed. She was so encouraged by what God was doing. Read verse 19 through 23 in the same chapter. The very next morning, they rose and worshiped before the Lord, and they went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of her time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, because I asked the Lord for him. When her husband Elkanah went up to all the family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vow, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, "After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always." "Do what seems best to you," her husband Elkanah said to her. Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good his word." So the woman stayed at home and nursed her son until she had weaned him. To wean a child back in that day meant to be fully nourished or nurtured that child. And this wasn't only a few months until he's off of breast milk, but it actually took up to several years. And in some cases, it could be up to 7 years or more. So it wasn't just a physical nourishment that Hannah was giving Samuel, but it would have been spiritual as well. She was the teacher for Samuel in his early days. Even Paul wrote to Timothy saying his spiritual learning was from his mother and his grandmother. Right? There was no mention of Timothy's father. Timothy learned his faith from his mother and grandmother. And I love that as well. Most of my faith has been learned from the mothers in my life. From both of my moms. My physical mom, I think the very first memory I have of what prayer is I remember we watched Bruce Almighty, if you guys have ever seen that movie. And there's a scene in that movie where it talks about he's kind of praying to God, and it sounds more like a beauty pageant prayer, world peace and these different things. And he says a second prayer after further prompting. And he prays about what's really on his heart. He prays, I pray that I can fall out of love with this woman that he was pursuing. And by the end of the movie, I remember my mom just asking me, "Why do you think that was a good prayer?" And I was like, "I don't know." He's like, "Because he prayed what was really on his heart." And I remember that since I was 8 years old. I remember that. My second mom, I remember that sometimes prayer is the only answer you have. There are times that there are challenges in our family with our brothers and our sisters, and at times I can feel frustrated. I'm like, "Don't do this or do this," and da-da-da. She's like, "All you got to do is pray." And I would be actually angry at that saying for a very long time. But I've learned that prayer sometimes is your only answer. There's a Jewish proverb that says, God couldn't be everywhere, so he created mothers. Now, obviously, we don't agree with that, but it sounds pretty good. But the challenge here is that God must be first, period. If things are competing in your life for first place, you do not have the loving relationship with God that he wants with you. And you might see that in different times in your schedule, in your righteousness, in your relationships, how you're showing it. It's are you seeing God first in your life? If I said that with other people, there's things competing with it. If I said that to Tegan, you're number one, but there are some close contenders, right? How would she feel? Wouldn't be good. In the same way, if you go, "Yeah, God kind of scraping by," it's not good enough. It's awesome that we get to see great examples today, though, of Johnson and Anook getting baptized, putting God first in their life. They've had some challenges these last couple of days, and some great Bible studies and calling their parents and going after it, but it's awesome to see that they're putting God first, and we're very grateful to celebrate that today. Now, point number 3, and coming to a quick close, great mothers have great plans. It says, after he was weaned, that being Samuel, she took the boy with him, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "Pardon me, my lord. As surely as I live, I am a woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord granted me what I asked for him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life will be given over to the Lord," and he worshiped the Lord there. A little historical background. In the modern Bibles, the books are ordered from Judges, Ruth, and then Samuel. In the Hebrew Bible back in the day, it went straight from Judges to Samuel. Now, why is that pretty cool in what they did, instead of just putting Ruth in the middle there? Well, the book of Judges ends with a depiction of the nation of Israel without a king and acting independently as they saw fit. And there was an image that they were at their lowest. And so the solution was, if you start from there straight to 1 Samuel chapter 1, it was a mother's prayer and her son. Samuel was going to be the solution of all those problems of Judges. It came straight back to that. Her plan wasn't just to be satisfied with the child, but she had a dream for him. Even children cannot take a place of God and his kingdom. She didn't get the child and now he's mine. This is everything. It's like she gave him to God. When we finally received a gift from God, a child, she gave it back to God. Hannah realized that everything is not really ours. Right? Even the blessing that God gives us, not really ours. You're only a steward of it for a moment. You're just touching it now. It's not always going to be yours. Everything we have is left to another when we pass away. And she could have dreamed selfishly. Right? At last I have a child. At last I can kind of show him around and everything. Or pray for more kids so I can still compete with this other wife. No, it was like, I got this, I got the blessing, and she gave it back to God. It wasn't just a way to get what she wanted. She wasn't just praying just so she can get the desires of her heart. It was always to honor God. She was willing to give it up and wanted to give it to God. Her plans was not just to involve God. Her plan was God. And I think that's a big difference. It helps to take a look at our life and realize, are we just involving God in our life, in our plannings, or is everything centered around him? You know, mothers might understand this, that there are times where you involve your children, right? Like you're cooking or you're cleaning something up and the little kids want to help. They're not really helping, but you're kind of involving them to keep them entertained, right? And that's the same way sometimes that we can do with God. Like, oh, I already know what my plans are. I already know what I want to do, but I'll pray to God every now and then so he feels involved. God, if you want this, or please bless this, or bless this job that I'm going to get anyways, right? We can kind of just involve God in our lives instead of everything we plan is God. In our hearts, we think we're doing it, on our own, but we pray and read his word because we want him just to feel involved. But instead, are your dreams solely on God? Everything that you're doing, every plan that you have for the future, everything is like, this is for God. Is uni fully for God? Is your job fully for God? Your relationships fully for God? Your ambitions fully for God? Money fully for God? Regardless of what it is, doesn't just involve God, but everything surrounds God. In conclusion, I want to end with these reminders that we learn from our amazing mothers as well as Hannah. You are valuable regardless of your problems. We think that our problems or our hurts or our pains make us less, but they are nothing to be ashamed of. You are loved by God and you are loved by us as well. When you have pain, God has a plan. When you are at your worst, God is at his work. And so we can see these things. You need to set your right priorities that you're going to live your life with. That God is number one, and put God in the center of your plans. Once again, happy Mother's Day. Have an amazing day. Thank you guys very much.